There is a terrifying kind of presence that doesn't need to speak, doesn't need to impress, and doesn't even need to exist loudly. It is the presence of the void, the man who offers nothing, no emotion, no need, no validation, no approval. He becomes a mirror to those around him, forcing them to fill in the silence, to interpret the blankness, to project their own insecurities and desires into the empty space he creates. And in doing so, he gains control over them, not by overpowering them, but by making them collapse into themselves. This is Machiavelli's hidden law. Offer them nothing, and they will give you everything. When you become the void, you force people to do the work. You become ungraspable, unknowable, unreadable. And in a world where everyone is screaming to be understood, your silence becomes obsession. Your absence becomes presence. Your lack of hunger becomes the very thing that draws others in. Because here's the truth. People are not drawn to what they can predict. They're drawn to what they can't decode. And when you become a void, when you deliberately withhold attention, emotion, opinion, even identity, you create a vacuum. And humans are wired to fill vacuums. They hate the unknown. They hate ambiguity, but they're addicted to it. So when you give them nothing, they lean in. They ask more. They chase more. They offer more just to understand you, just to define you, just to gain a foothold in your world. This is where true power begins. Not when you declare yourself, but when you let others declare for you. When you speak, they can judge you. But when you say nothing, they must guess. And in their guessing, they often give away far more than you ever would have. That is the genius behind Machiavelli's law of the void. You win not by fighting, but by not showing up to the fight at all. And still they lose. Most people overshare, they over-explain, they overexpose. They believe that being known equals being respected. But the more you reveal, the more they categorize you. The more you express, the more they limit you. And worst of all, the more you offer, the less valuable you become. Because when something is always available, always visible, always predictable, it is never feared, never wanted deeply. It is just there. It becomes background noise. But when you become nothing, you become everything. You become a space people rush to fill. You become the question no one can answer. You become the silent presence in a loud room that makes everyone lower their voice. This is not passive. It's weaponized emptiness, a deliberate strategy. You do not withdraw because you are insecure. You withdraw because you understand that silence builds altitude, that ambiguity builds obsession, that being unknown is the highest form of leverage. Look at the most powerful figures in history, not the loud ones, but the ones who said little and yet dominated every room they entered. Think of Marcus Aurelius watching the empire crumble without complaint. Think of Genghis Khan offering false treaties before total destruction. Think of Machiavelli himself riding in exile, speaking to the few while his silence screamed to the many. The ones who reveal least often shaped the most. Even in nature, this law holds. The black hole devours galaxies not by radiating light, but by pulling it in. The ocean has power not because it announces itself, but because of its depth, its mystery, its refusal to be held. When you become the void, you move like that. Still, quiet, heavy, with meaning, and others feel it, even if they can't articulate it. They sense your detachment, your restraint, your self-possession, and that unreachable energy is what makes you magnetic. This is why the most dangerous man is not the one who talks, but the one who watches. Not the one who needs, but the one who offers nothing. He doesn't react. He doesn't seek. He doesn't impress. And because of that, everyone around him becomes reactive, desperate, performative, trying to draw him out, trying to make him visible, but he remains still. And in that stillness, he controls the room. Understand this. The void makes others confess. When you're silent, they talk more. When you're cold, they offer warmth. When you withhold, they overshare. And every time, they give more to fill your nothingness. They lose leverage. You don't steal it. It is surrendered. That is why you must never rush to be known. You must never fight to be understood. You must never give them your full shape. Blur the edges. Let them wander. Let them chase. Because the more they chase, the more they invest. And the more they invest, the more they obey. The modern world punishes mystery. It wants you loud, transparent, emotionally exposed. But that's because it fears silence. It fears the man who doesn't need to be known because he cannot be controlled. He cannot be framed. He cannot be tamed. The man who becomes the void doesn't just escape judgment. He becomes the one who judges because everyone else is, dancing for attention. And he's not even clapping, and yet everyone waits for his move. You must train yourself in this. It will feel unnatural at first. You will want to speak, to respond, to declare your truth. Don't. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be felt. And the less you give, the more they feel. Every unanswered question becomes a hook. Every delayed reply becomes an emotional investment. Every moment you choose silence over reaction adds to your weight. And soon, you're not just a man. They experience you as a force, an element, a presence they cannot ignore. And here's the final layer. The void is not emptiness, it's discipline, it's control. You feel everything, but you show almost nothing. You calculate before you speak, you delay before you act. You never reveal your hand unless you've already won the game. And in doing so, you rise above the emotional economy. You become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you refuse to play their game. When someone attacks you, you offer nothing. When someone demands answers, you offer nothing. When someone begs for validation, you offer nothing. Because the moment you offer something, you enter their frame and your power dies in their hands. But when you become the void, they shape themselves around you. That is Machiavelli's law of the void. And it's not just a strategy, it's a way of being. Because the man who offers nothing is the man they give everything to. The moment you internalize this law that offering nothing creates everything, you begin to understand the fundamental asymmetry of power. Influence does not come from giving more, it comes from holding back. Because when you offer less, what you do, give becomes amplified. A glance, a word, a movement, suddenly it all means something. Because you've made your presence rare, you've made your responses expensive. And in a world drowning in noise, what is rare becomes divine. Most men dilute themselves without even realizing it. They talk too much. They react too fast. They reveal too early. They explain, justify, and confess in the name of honesty or connection. But every revelation is a transaction. Every emotional disclosure is a gamble. And most of the time, it's a losing bet. The more you give, the more they measure you. The more they measure you, the more they control you. And the more they control you, the less you matter. That's the hidden cost of openness. You become predictable. But the void cannot be measured because it does not reveal. It absorbs. It watches. It waits. And in that waiting, it grows heavier. It dominates. Space without action, presence without performance. And this is what unnerves people. Not that you're doing too much, but that you're doing nothing. And still, they feel your weight. Imagine this in a negotiation. Two people sit across from each other. One speaks quickly, trying to persuade, to explain, to fill the silence. The other just watches, still, silent, neutral. Who holds the power? The one who says nothing because his silence forces the other into exposure. It creates discomfort. And in that discomfort, they start offering more than they intended, more details, more concessions, more truth. That is the power of the void. It is not passive, it is a trap. The Machiavellian man learns to master this art. He trains his face to be unreadable. He trains his voice to be measured. He trains his energy to be restrained, not because he is suppressing himself, but because he knows that expression is power, and power must be used, not leaked. To express everything is to give away the throne. To express nothing is to make others bring their offerings to you. This is not about becoming emotionally dead. It is about becoming strategically empty. To be full of awareness but empty in. Expression to feel everything but show almost nothing. That discipline is what makes you terrifying, because people can sense you're not numb, but they can't read you. They can feel there's fire behind your eyes, but they don't know what it's burning for. That's what draws them in. Not what you reveal, but what you refuse to. Now, Geeky, apply this to relationships. Most people give too much too soon. They pour their thoughts, their past, their emotions into someone else's lap, hoping it will build intimacy. But it doesn't. It builds familiarity. And familiarity kills mystery. The person who gives too much is loved for convenience, not for power. But when you give nothing, no emotional validation, no explanation of your feelings, no desperate attempts to be understood, you become fascinating. People lean in, trying to figure you out. They assign depth to your silence. They imagine complexity in your restraint. And in that imagination, they create your legend. Because here's the truth most won't admit. People don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with what they imagine you are. And the less you give, the more space they have to project. If you want to be remembered, don't explain yourself. Let them wonder. Let them obsess. Let them try to make sense of you in your absence. That's how you haunt them long after you've left the room. Even enemies are weakened by this law. A man who insults you expects a reaction. He expects emotion. He wants to see if he hit the mark. If you respond, even in fury, you confirm his relevance. But if you remain still, blank, unbothered, you deny him everything. And in that denial, you win because he cannot read your silence. He cannot feed off your energy. And eventually, he begins to question himself. Did I miss? Did he not care? Did I even matter? And doubt, once planted, grows like rot. You didn't destroy him with force. You destroyed him with emptiness. Machiavelli understood this on a political level. He advised rulers to be feared more than loved, but more importantly, to remain mysterious. The prince who shows all his cards invites betrayal, but the one who moves unpredictably, who speaks sparingly, who reveals only what is necessary, he becomes a legend. People begin to speak about him in whispers. They speculate, they invent stories, and in doing so, they build a myth larger than reality. That is the power of the void. People fill it with their own meaning. Now this law becomes even more dangerous when combined with presence. If you are nothing and look like nothing, people forget you. But if you are nothing and look like power, like confidence, like danger, you become unforgettable. That contrast is what leaves a mark. The stone-cold eyes in a calm face. The silence that radiates gravity. The unspoken confidence of a man who walks through noise without reacting to any of it. You don't need to convince people of your worth. You need only carry yourself like someone who does not explain. And once they feel that posture, they will either rise to your level or fall, trying. Let's take this further. In every situation, your first weapon is silence. Not as a gimmick, but as a test. Say less in meetings. Respond slower in conversations. Offer nothing emotional when confronted. Watch what happens. Most people will trip over themselves to break the silence. They'll overcommit. They'll over-reveal. They'll try to pull you in. And you won't need to do a thing. Because when you are the void, the world reacts to you. And that's the ultimate advantage. You dictate tempo. You control rhythm. You create discomfort by simply existing. This is the opposite of desperation. Most people need to be seen. You do not. Most people need to be liked. You do not. Most people need to be understood. You become powerful because you don't. And your refusal to participate in their emotional economy is what makes you rich in influence. They start to give. They start to chase. They start to open. And all you gave them was nothing. Not because you were withholding, but because you are the void. And in the void there is no need, only gravity. And gravity always pulls without effort. This is the Machiavellian law that most will never practice because it demands inner stillness. It demands composure. It demands the strength to not perform. But once you master it, you'll never chase again. Because when you become the void, they will bring you everything, just to escape the silence you never try to break. Once you understand that, silence is not absence, but dominance. You stop treating expression as power. You start treating containment as control. You realize that the less you offer, the more you are pursued. Not because people are kind, but because they are addicted to the unknown. Curiosity is the most manipulative force in human psychology, and when you master the art of offering nothing, you become the source of that addiction. Not through lies, not through seduction, but through your refusal to fill in the blanks. This is not about playing games. This is about removing yourself from the game entirely. You are not unpredictable because you try to be. You are unpredictable because you give them nothing to predict. There is no rhythm to follow, no emotional trail to decode, no pattern to exploit. You become the blank page that drives them insane. Because most people are so accustomed to reading others like cheap books that when they encounter someone with no pages, no narrative, and no explanation, they spiral. And the deeper the spiral, the deeper their investment. Because that's the paradox of the void. The less you give, the more they give. They fill the silence with effort. They project their hopes, their fears, their fantasies into you. They build a version of you so powerful that it overshadows the real thing. And you say, nothing. You remain calm, you remain still, you remain unknown. Let's talk about power dynamics in everyday life. Walk into a room where everyone is trying to prove something. Status, intelligence, charm, authority. They perform, they posture, they signal. Now you imagine a man who walks in, sits down, and says almost nothing. He listens. His eyes don't dart around nervously. He doesn't laugh to fit in. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't chase the spotlight. He becomes the spotlight, not because of what he does, but because of what he refuses to do. Everyone else is trying to be seen. He's fine with being invisible, and that terrifies them because if he doesn't want to be seen, maybe he's already above them. That's the effect of the void. It's not passive, it's threatening because it implies control. Control of self, control of impulse, control of narrative. And the man who can control himself will always end up controlling others. Machiavelli would say, if you must reveal something, let it be exactly enough to create uncertainty. Say something cryptic and walk away. Smile without context. Withhold praise. Delay your answers. Always keep them guessing. Not because you enjoy cruelty, but because guessing is a form of submission. When they are guessing, they are no longer thinking about themselves. They are now trapped in your frame. The void doesn't ask for loyalty. It creates it. The void doesn't seek validation. It reverses it. The void doesn't move forward to be welcomed. It waits to be invited and makes others question whether they even deserve its presence. This is psychological warfare. Subtle, elegant, devastating. Now look at relationships through this lens. Romantic, social, professional. Most people believe that connection requires expression. And yes, it does eventually. But the most high-value people don't reveal themselves quickly. They delay intimacy. They filter relentlessly. They test through silence because anyone who is real will remain curious through the silence. Anyone who is fake will grow resentful of it. In this way, the void becomes not just a method of control, but a method of selection. And once you begin to use it this way, you no longer waste your team. You no longer chase people to prove your worth. You no longer entertain those who only love you. When you perform, you just wait and watch, and the world begins to sort itself. The ones who can't handle your silence were never going to handle your truth. The ones who grow impatient with your distance were never going to be stable with your closeness. The ones who walk away when you offer nothing would have drained you when you gave everything. This is how the void protects you. Not by keeping people out, but by letting the wrong people remove themselves. And that's when you reach a new tier of power, emotional minimalism. You begin to live with fewer explanations, fewer apologies, fewer words. But every word you do speak becomes sacred, because when you say nothing 90% of the time, the 10% you do say reshapes the entire room. It lands harder. It is remembered longer. It carries weight because people know you don't speak to be heard. You speak when you have already won. Let's be clear, this way of being is not natural. It must be forged. You will have to kill the part of yourself that wants to prove, explain, beg, and impress. You will have to suffocate the part of you that feels empty in silence. You will have to bury the instinct to be liked. And what will rise from that grave is a version of you that no longer moves for affection, but attracts it anyway. Not because you played a role, but because you became a presence. This is the Machiavellian void. Not emptiness, but dominance through absence. Not silence as passivity, but silence as tension. You are the unsaid sentence, the unfought battle, the unseen threat. And it drives people mad because they cannot possess what they cannot define. You are no longer offering anything, not opinion, not emotion, not access. And because of that, they offer you everything just to see what you might give next. And you never give it. You wait. And when you do give, they fall to their knees for scraps. This is not manipulation. This is architecture. You are building demand through discipline. You are shaping attention through absence. You are controlling perception through restraint. Because at the highest level of power, it is not what you say that moves people. It is what you withhold. Eventually, the void stops being a strategy and becomes your identity. You're no longer faking restraint. You're no longer calculating. Your silence. You've lived in it long enough that it becomes effortless. And that's when it becomes lethal, because now people can't tell whether you're holding back or whether this is just who you are. That uncertainty, that aura of unknowability is what begins to pull people toward you like gravity. They don't know what you want. They don't know what you feel. They don't know what you're thinking, but they feel you. They feel your absence when you're not there. They feel your presence without you speaking. They feel your power even when you're sitting perfectly still. And it drives them mad in the most addictive way possible. This is how kings are made. Because when the world realizes it can't read you, it starts trying to serve you, to guess your motives, to please your silence, to win your attention. Not because you asked for it, but because you refuse to ask. The void becomes a throne, and people kneel before it because they're too afraid of what you'll say when you finally do. Speak, or worse, what will happen if you never do? Let's make this practical now. Everywhere you go, you carry energy. Most people use that energy to fill space, to crack jokes, to make conversation, to keep things moving. They hate silence. They hate the unknown. They fear being forgotten. So, they become clowns, entertainers, soft-bellied diplomats, always smoothing over tension with talk. But you let the silence do the talking. You let the tension build. You let others stumble into their own discomfort trying to interpret you, because you've learned that silence is not a void to be filled. It's a weapon to be sharpened. Every moment you don't speak makes them speak more. Every glance you don't return makes them crave it. Every question you ignore makes them ask it again, louder, more desperate. And in that desperation, you are fed. You now understand that by becoming less available, you become more powerful. That doesn't just apply to attention. It applies to emotion, validation, vulnerability, access. The less of you they can have, the more of themselves they will give to get it. And this is exactly what Machiavelli knew when he wrote that a prince should never reveal all his thoughts. He said it plainly. It is not necessary to be honest only to appear honest. Why? Because revealing your true mind makes you predictable. And what's predictable is controllable. But the void cannot be predicted. The void cannot be controlled. The void is not a man, you understand. It is a man you feel. And the moment you become that man, people stop speaking to you casually. They pause before texting you. They rehearse. Before calling you, they ask themselves, did I do something wrong? Even when you said nothing at all. Why? Because the emotional economy has flipped. You are no longer buying attention. You are now the currency. They don't get your time, they earn it. They don't get your thoughts, they wait for them. They don't get your energy, they pay for it with respect, effort, and obsession. And if they don't, you remain the void, still, silent, unshaken. You don't punish people by reacting. You punish people by refusing to react. You don't chase to prove your worth. You leave the door open and let your absence do the talking. And that absence, that beautiful, unbearable, echoing absence, it burns people because it exposes the truth. They were never in control. You were, because you needed nothing from them, and they needed everything from you. That is the final form of power. The man who offers nothing is never obligated. He is never owned. He is never guilted into submission because he is already full, already anchored, already home within himself. So when they beg for access, he grants it slowly, if at all. When they seek validation, he withholds it, not out of cruelty, but because it's scarce. And when they finally get something from him, just a glance, a word, a moment, it feels like gold. Not because it's flashy, but because it's rare. You've now become the embodiment of asymmetrical value. You give almost nothing and get everything because you understand what most men never will. In a world full of performers, clowns, and noisemakers, the one who becomes the void becomes the stage itself, and the world performs for you. At the highest level, the void is not just strategy. It's identity forged by fire. You didn't choose to become it because it looked cool. You became it because the world pushed you to the edge. And instead of falling, you vanished. You erased the part of yourself that needed to be understood. You cut off the part that needed to be validated. You suffocated the part that begged to be seen. And what remained was stillness, but not emptiness. Because the void is not hollow. The void is full of control, of vision, of self-containment. It is power with no noise. It is command without movement. It is presence without explanation. Most people live in fear of being ignored. The Machiavellian man builds an empire on it. Because when you offer the world nothing, no approval, no neediness, no energy to feed on, it is forced to orbit you. That's the secret. Every manipulator, every ruler, every icon understood. The less you give, the more they need. And eventually they give you everything just for a taste of your attention, just for a moment of your insight, just to feel close to something. They cannot control. It's psychological gravity, and you've become the black hole. They throw their affection into you. They throw their curiosity into you. They throw their vulnerability into you, and you remain still because you're not here to take what they offer. You're here to make them want to offer it in the first place. That's the law of the void. You don't chase, and yet you are chased. You don't demand, and yet you are obeyed. You don't beg for anything because you already own the thing everyone's selling. Internal stability, and the world is starving for it. So now your silence becomes sacred. Your presence becomes heavy. Even your absence becomes a signal. You can leave a room and your name will stay. You can stay silent and the tension will speak. You can offer nothing and receive everything. Let's look at the battlefield of modern life. Everyone is screaming to be seen, posting, performing, declaring, arguing, crying for digital attention like beggars at the gate of the algorithm. They don't even realize they've become slaves to reaction. Everything they do is designed to provoke something, and in that desperation, they hand over all their power. You are not one of them. You are not moved by likes. You are not addicted to validation. You are not a performer. In someone else's arena, you are the one who watches, the one who waits, the one who says little and owns the room with a glance because they feel it. They feel your refusal to need them. And that refusal dominates them more than any speech, any threat, or any emotional plea ever could. This is how kings rule, with silence, with composure, with boundaries so strong that others mistake them for walls. But they're not walls, they're filters. Only those who can handle the silence are worthy of the sound. Only those who don't flinch when they're ignored are worthy of a response. Only those who give value without needing a reaction are allowed in. That's how you scale the void from psychological power to social empire. Because now your silence is not just power. It's branding. It's reputation. It's your currency. People talk about you when you say nothing. They study your words like scripture because you say so few. They watch your moves like prophecy because they're so rare. This is not mystery as a tactic. This is discipline as destiny. Because here's what no one tells you. When you give too much, too often, too freely, you become disposable. But when you become scarce, not through hiding, but through emotional self-sufficiency, you become essential. People don't want what's available. They want what feels earned. And when you become the void, everything you give feels earned. Even a glance, even a reply, even your silence. That's what drives them mad. They know you're watching. They know you're aware. But you don't move until you choose to. And when you do move, you get full attention, full obedience, full leverage. Because they know you could have ignored them. They know you don't need them. And that's exactly why they give you their soul. Now you've reached the final layer. You've become the unmovable object. Not because you're stubborn, but because you're full of direction, full of presence, full of power. And in this fullness, you offer the world. Nothing, no explanation, no hunger, no desperation. And in return, they offer you everything they once withheld from everyone else. Respect, loyalty, obsession, obedience, because they feel it now. They feel what you are. You are the man who does not react. You are the man who cannot be pulled. You are the man who does not beg. You are the void, and the void always wins.